I think that in the digital space, you're put in the unfortunate place of competing against the largest giants across multiple industries. You're facing people, especially in the e-commerce space, the Amazons, the Best Buys, the Walmarts, that are ruthlessly testing every possible improvement and change they can make to a site or to design or to any part of that, because for them, the most minute increase in making something better translates very quickly to revenue at scale. All of these companies that have focused on just making things clear, jargonless, and streamlined. And those are the expectations that people bring to all of their other interactions. And that's a really hard place to be.
New choices, new players, new models of care. You know, consumer first healthcare is everywhere. For us to build the future, to see what's new, we gotta look at the world from a different point of view. Consumer innovation ain't going away. I say it's here to stay. Today it leads the way. We gotta drop the silos. We're all the same team. Experience, business, tech, and marketing. So join us now. Join the revolution. Consumer first health is the evolution. Status quo or like status no. Yeah, this is the healthcare rap. Yo, come on, let's go.
Welcome back to the leading podcast for consumer experience champions in healthcare. This is episode 339. I'm Jared Johnson, and here's what's going to go down today. We have the Flava of the week about Kroger's new weight management program. How are Kroger and other out-of-the-box brands innovating in the space? And how is weight loss continuing to blur the lines between health and wellness? I'll talk about that. Then I speak with Ryan Kilgallen from Over It. There's still a lot of work that goes into making a website the core of a consumer experience. So Ryan goes back to the basics as he walks us through how his team prioritizes engagement and what we can all learn from the process. It's time to dive right in. Are you ready? Let's go. Flava of the week. Kroger Health's latest announcement shows that weight loss programs continue to blur the lines between health and wellness, retail and traditional care, clinics and grocery chains. On June 7th, Kroger Health's The Little Clinic announced a revamped weight management program with a holistic and personalized approach to medical support and education. Their news release stated that when medically appropriate, patients will be able to explore medical treatment, including GLP-1s such as Wegovy, Zepbound, and others as part of their weight loss journey. Starting at $99 per visit, the program is available in person and via telehealth, and The Little Clinic accepts insurance plans to help cover the program's costs. They went on to say that the program's patient-centered offerings include resources on fresh and healthy foods, ongoing medical visits from a board-certified clinical provider, routine coaching, community support information, and if appropriate, the inclusion of prescribed FDA-approved medical treatments, including GLP-1s. The program also places emphasis on Kroger Health's food as medicine philosophy, which focuses on food playing a key role in preventing illness and ongoing health maintenance. By incorporating food as medicine into a weight management program, patients have the resources they need to explore how specific foods can assist in starting and maintaining weight loss. Three things stood out to me here. First, how a grocery giant uses some of the same consumer-focused language to describe their offerings. Megan Brown, Kroger Health's chief nursing officer, was quoted as saying, "We know when patients achieve their healthy weight goals, they live healthier lives. Patients can meet with our team in their familiar neighborhood retailer or virtually in the comfort of their home. This is just one more way we are making healthcare convenient, accessible, and affordable for families." Close quote. You see, that even sounds like a brand promise from a retailer, not a health system. Second, that blurring of the lines I was referring to between health and wellness. Weight management has been around forever, but an argument can be made that the GLP-1 revolution is being led by grocery chains, fitness franchises, and other retailers faster than by medical professionals in traditional health systems. Third, if that's the case, can primary doctors in those traditional settings take the lead in offering innovative cash pay programs that address consumers' actual health and wellness needs? Can we once and for all align incentives for them to be just as motivated to prevent illness as they are to treat it? Can my family doctor, which fewer households have than ever before, be my trusted resource not just for when things go wrong, but also for when I'm ready to engage in my health proactively? By the way, that's what direct primary care has been doing for years, but I digress. What is clear is that we can start connecting the dots about weight management as a high-demand consumer offering. If you're still not convinced, you're welcome to brush up on our interviews this year with Omada's Wei Li Xiao, Form Health's Evan Richardson, and Sesame's Michael Botta, all on this topic. It's a trend, people. Let's keep our eyes on the innovations that are coming out of Kroger Health and other out-of-the-box organizations as we look to the future of retail and consumer brands in healthcare. That's another way that we'll build the healthcare of tomorrow, and that's the Flava of the week.
flow, the flow, the flow.
All right, everyone, let's get into the flow. Let's have a little fun today. Please give it up for my guest, Ryan Kilgallen. Ryan is the Director of Digital at Over It. He'll explain a little bit more about the agency itself, kind of how that's structured, what his responsibilities are. We're going to talk today about 25 plus years of having websites generally across the board out there. And that doesn't mean we've figured everything out. There's still a lot of work that goes into making a website the core of most digital experiences. So there's just a lot that goes into that. And that means we have to prioritize customer experience along the way. So that's where we're going to focus on today with some specifics, a little case study that Ryan could share with us. But first and foremost, Ryan, welcome to the Healthcare Wrap.
Thank you so much, Jared. It's good to be here. So I'll go right into the little spiel. Like you said, I'm the Director of Digital for Over It. We're a full-service marketing agency based in upstate New York, about 3 hours north of the city. But we have a national clientele across a diverse range of industries. So one of our sub-agencies is Smith & Jones, which some of your listeners might be familiar with. And they're an agency that's focused solely on hospitals, health systems, insurance companies, and other providers. So day to day, I'm working across all of that. I'm coordinating strategy with different teams to make sure that all of our clients are getting a true integrated digital strategy. That no one's working in a silo and that each team is understanding how the choices they make or the work they create plays into the overall digital experience of one of our clients' campaigns.
I love that. And for the audio version of the podcast, people won't be able to see, but you have a stained glass window behind you that's pretty beautiful. You want to tell people just what that's like, what you were just telling me pre-show about how the company's set up and why that is in the shot.
Yeah. I figured to make a good background. So the company's really fortunate in that they chose to totally renovate an old church a couple of years ago. And it was a really big local deal because up here in upstate, we've got a lot of churches that are not in the greatest of condition. And they actually completely came in, they restored it, they gutted it, and they did it in a renewable way. So like the desk that I am sitting at, big conference desk, is wood from the pews, all the tables, wood from the pews, everything was reused and saved, and it just turned into a beautiful space. Cathedral ceilings, we got the stained glass. It's a good place to work.
Very cool. I'm curious, what's one of your favorite things about working with healthcare clients? I love hearing about a nationwide client base, but what are some of those unique things about working with healthcare?
To me, success in healthcare means success in helping people get access to the right care when they need it and making sure they feel informed and empowered to make those decisions for themselves. And that's close to my heart per se, because my last 3 years at my last job, I was client facing per se. So I worked at a regional healthcare payer. And as a result, I used the same health insurance, the same website, the same portal, everything that another 500,000 people do. So, people's frustrations that they're calling customer care about or saying, I have an issue with that, I'm also experiencing it. The reps are experiencing it. And, as you're doing work day to day and improving the experience, it gives you a real incentive to make each part of that experience better. And you also get to use the actual results of your job like yourself. And that's pretty cool. It made me aware of no matter what part of healthcare you're in, that there's a real impact that you're having on people's lives.
Let's dig right into this because I think there's a lot of different aspects of this story. And the story I'm talking about is a recent website overhaul that you were involved in, you worked on for a regional healthcare payer where one of the priorities was the customer experience. And as always, that kind of warms my heart is what I like to say. I like to hear how that's important and how we are integrating that into big projects like a website overhaul. Can you give us some background on the project? And then we'll get into some of the techniques you were using to keep customer experience at the forefront. But first and foremost, set the stage for us and tell us a little bit more about the project.
Sure. So before I even go into the project, I think what I want to talk about is customer experience and user experience. So it's like we put the customer first by putting user experience first. And I think that raises the immediate question of what is user experience? It's really broad. It's such a broad thing that it can feel almost meaningless. And I have a good way to explain it. And it goes off of what you just said, where you're we've had 25 years in building websites and I don't know if we're doing it well yet. To which I'd be we've had thousands of years in building simple buildings that we can't get right. There's a Chipotle that is near my house. And every time I go to the Chipotle, it has these large doors, these huge, cool wooden handles. And every time I go in it, I can't open the door. And then when I leave, I also can't open the door. And it's the doorknob. It's there's a great book called The Design of Everyday Things that talks about that. And it's the user experience of a Chipotle is great. I love Chipotle. But when I can't get in and I can't get out and I'm holding stuff, that's a bad time. And to me, user experience is just the sum of all of these little things. It's like, how do we find all of these doorknobs on our websites that are just like, they're not working and they're causing frustration? So I think that would be setting the stage for, with an analogy, what we were trying to do. And I can tell you a little bit about the actual project. So this was a regional payer called MVP Healthcare. And where we were coming from was a website. It was a WordPress site that had been around for about 6 years for part of it and 10 years for the other. And it had not had a lot of love. I'm sure this will ring true to some of the enterprise folks here, but the whole platform was put on a tech debt list. And so they were like, you have this now, you can't really invest in it. It is the way it is. And so what happened is, years go by and we can't make broad experience improvements. We can just kind of add pieces. And so it just became a bloated multi-site experience focused primarily on shopping. And with most of the healthcare industry, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a payer, you have this problem of we have so many product lines, we have so many verticals, and a lot of them actually have duplicate information. So in this case, we had separate microsites on this site for every line of business: commercial, Medicare, Medicaid, Child Health Plus. And they all had very similar content, similar layouts. There's big buttons on each page. Our primary branded color was a shade of red that fails every accessibility test you can do. I think my favorite example was within some of these microsites, you could end up in a situation where there was 2 different navigations and 3 contact us buttons, and every contact us button went to a completely separate part of the site that were all contact us pages. So it's like, you just like so many years and you're just at some point, and I'm using this too, again. So it's like every time I have to use my healthcare and I have to log in or I have to find something, I'm really aware of this. And so is everybody else. So, I was fortunate enough to be part of the actual large enterprise CMS change where we moved off of WordPress over to Sitecore. And with that, we had an opportunity to finally integrate multiple sites to focus not just on shopping, but on the customer experience overall. I think that people forget a lot about internal marketing, retention marketing, about reducing churn. They focus too much about acquisition. And so in this case, we really put a premium on saying we want to keep shopping good. It was the one thing that the other site did well, but we want to make everything else better so that people talk about us, so that people want to use us, so that people don't want to change. And we ended with a pretty cohesive, intuitive, and accessible website. And given all of these service lines, it does a pretty damn good job at making one experience work for everyone. And we kind of did that through broad data-driven testing. So I'll kind of pause there and just, if you got any reactions to that.
The thesis is spot on, right? This is the heart of any customer experience or user experiences, all these mini engagements. And that's even the theme of our season. This new season is modern engagement. What does that mean? They're the atoms of the molecular structure of an experience. It's all these tiny little touch points. And any one of those can divert somebody from having that experience that they desire. It can add friction. And so there's so much more that takes place to get you there than most people who aren't working on that on the back end might realize. They just expect it to work. They expect everything to work and have this awesome frictionless experience. And that expectation, I feel like, is something we have been focusing on as well. It's that expectation that makes it challenging because the expectations have risen so much in the last few years. So I'm guessing there are a lot of techniques that you had to use along the way from that point on to prioritize that experience and to keep customer experience at the forefront. What were some of the things you did to make sure that happened?
So there was, I would say, 4 broad pieces that we used. We used what's called card sorting, and that's when you give a group of people a set of items. Sometimes they're literally written on cards. You do it digitally. In this case, we just said, hey, here's like 40 different things. These are things you'd find on a healthcare website. Can you group them into categories? And then we're going to look at all the categories that each of these people come up with and see what they agree on and what they don't and where those similarities are. What's really important about that is you're throwing out your own bias of how you would categorize information, and you're getting it from your customers. So a big reason why we started with that was that we knew going into this design that we were going to have to throw out most of the internal ideas that we had about our site. And that means that you're going to get a lot of people that have personal viewpoints. They have years of their own bias. They've been deep in products or things, and they're going to want their piece at the forefront. They're going to have their very strong opinion on this is the right way. This is how it's been done. This is how we should do it. And we wanted to make sure that for every one of these changes that we proposed, and I'd say something like for every controversial change, but when you're redesigning a website top to bottom, every change is controversial. We wanted objective, valid data to support that it was the right choice. A classic is it's even harder to persuade executives that their view may be incorrect. You know, like you want to be able to put something in front of them and be like, I get it. I know exactly why you feel that way. This is how it is, though, in a sense. And so you start with something like card sorting, and we just see how do people actually think about stuff. One great way to think about this, people should Google this because I can't describe this visual well, but look up a similarity tree for UX testing. And what you're going to see is this strange little pyramid with color-coded boxes and all these words going down it. What it basically does is summarize a card sort and say, here's all the terms that are most closely connected together. And a great example of how we use this was for coming up with a category called Find Care. So what that encompassed was multiple items, but especially finding a doctor and finding a dentist. And that's not something that you would necessarily intuitively do. You know, you might put them in separate places. That was what our old site had. It had separate places for them, different menu items. But people actually, 81% said they should be closely related. And so we put them in the same page. We came back. We made prototypes of the menus. We had people test that was exactly what they thought, that we didn't make a bad change. And with that, we managed to reduce multiple clicks down to one click that we could put on the front page of every page of the site, which was just Find Care. And pieces like that are a huge part of how you improve a customer experience. You know, figuring out this is a healthcare payer. People are primarily coming to our site when they need care or to administrate their care. And keeping everything to as few clicks was huge. Let me just start with some of the results before we go farther into the different techniques. And then I'll talk about kind of the guiding principles that we used for all of them. So overall NPS score improvement. We went from a 6.9 on the old site to an 8.9 on the new site. The bulk of that increase was due to a 200% increase in the people that scored 10s on it. So we went from about 14% of people saying that they would have rated our old site 10 out of 10 to a little over 40%. To shop for a plan, that was the one thing that our old site did well. We wanted to keep that and make it better. We managed to do a 66% decrease in the average time to shop from page load. So from 15 seconds to 4.7 seconds. Then we looked at tasks that represented common places that our customers got frustrated. So for instance, finding the member forms download page. That could be enrollment forms. That could be, like ANOC summary of benefits, things that were really hard to find. Google doesn't do a great job of finding them either. They can be really specific. And that was something that we'd get a lot of customer care calls about. So on the old website, we went from about only 35% of people on live website testing being able to find it. When they did find it, it took them 58 seconds. To after, we got it to 92% people able to find it. We also, for all of these tasks, checked how people felt about them. So before, 45% of those 35% felt that it was intuitive. When you think about 45% of 35, you start getting to a pretty small amount of people. But after, 96% of people found it intuitive. One of the big ones to me was finding a dentist. This was like personally close to home for me because it's one of those things that, you're just like the one time that you're like, I need to find a dentist. It's like, I couldn't figure out how to do it on our own site. And so I was like, we got to measure how to make this better. So we started with our base measurement. Before, 85% of users just flat out, they could not find it. They gave up. Normally, they'd try for at least a minute or something. After, 88% of people could find it in 15 seconds or less. So when I say user testing to prioritize the customer experience, what we're really saying is making quantitative, data-driven improvements that we can absolutely measure in objective ways like NPS score and also in qualitative ways like surveys and user feedback later.
I think that's important to emphasize the technique you used to communicate this internally, because you're right, everyone does have a bias towards how they think it's going to work. And you have to have some data in hand to have that conversation to break down the walls. That's one of the reasons why in most organizations, they haven't made these improvements. They may feel like their site for them has a good user user experience. And it's because it was designed and built according to their biases for how they look for things. And so that is an important part of the conversation. I feel like that we don't want to just gloss over, because that is a meaningful step towards improving the experience.
Yeah, and I think that raises a good point, which is that a lot of times when you build something, it does do something well. In our case, the site was really built, the original site was really built for commercial, individual, and business shoppers. Like it did them fine. But if you were like a Medicaid customer, if you were a Medicare customer, and those were our largest growing segments that we wanted to focus on business-wise, that was where the issues really started to come from. So, you on one hand are having to balance keeping everyone that is in the group where they're going, this works for me. I don't want you to add a new thing to this page. Why is Medicare suddenly going to be on my page? Why is this next to my menu item? Things like that, with people that desperately are saying, well, we need this. We need to be all over everything. We're not getting enough. And coming to this middle ground where you're saying it's never going to work for everyone, but it's going to work pretty well.
Other thoughts on the techniques you used, or the results, or other just insights from the project?
There was 3 guiding posts, I would say, to how we wanted to organize what's called the information architecture, which is as simple as, if you were to go into a library and you're trying to figure out where to go in the library to find a book, what does all the signage look like? So when we're trying to think about our website signage, which is our navigation, getting to these core places, we sat down and defined a set of user tasks, things like finding a doctor, finding where to pay a bill, how to shop. And we measured how long they were on our current site, how long it took to complete them on our current site, and how intuitive it was. So the way that we did this was we used a platform called Maze. It's just my more like Maze plug shout out. I love Maze. It makes things like this really easy, where we did live testing for all these tasks. And then what we also did was, in the middle of the website design process, this wasn't included even in the SAL, but we took a time to pause and be like, do we have budget to add actual user testing with prototyping? So we had interactive prototypes made of really the top part of the site. So the core pieces, like you're not trying to build out a whole site, just the pages that people would need to test. And we would figure out our changes, and then we would test if they were better or not. Broadly speaking, we got a lot right on the first try, but there was places that I'll go into that proved to be challenges or things that we missed or didn't think about. But then we still took user feedback after launch and improved. But with kind of a platform in mind, which gives you your tool and kind of a framework, because you figure out what can we do with this platform. The guiding questions that we used was, we wanted everything to be 2 clicks or less. What I mean by that is, if it was a core important thing that would be important to the customer experience, you should be anywhere on the site and get there in 2 clicks. And that was something that we achieved. And that's a huge reason why you're seeing these large decreases in time to complete a task, along with a higher clarity rating. The other one was, as touched upon, how long did it take to do a thing, and how did people feel about it? And with those 3 pieces, that provided us the framework for broadly improving everyone's experience. So we touched on earlier card sorting, so people grouping their own sets of items, and that lets you see how your customers think about your products. The other 2 pieces that we used greatly were live site testing. So before we started, making sure that as we're going into design, getting a baseline for the core things we want to change. As we move into the actual development process, we start going with prototypes. So we'd use Figma. We'd build out, this is literally what the new site would look like, down to having the complete images we would launch with. And we would test those paths, and we'd get heat maps of all of the testing. And that makes it really clear to see, like, you're like, oh, people are clicking in that corner, like what's happening there. And then followed all of these tasks with, again, these usability surveys and opinion scales. And it's just a couple things. It's not tons that you're looking at there. But again, that gives you quantitative information that you can put in front of someone else and say, this is what our budget is going to. It's going to drive business results. We can already tell you it's going to be better. There's big changes. They're going to be a lot for you. They're going to be a lot for customers at first, but they are better. And with that, you can message really well internally, and you can be confident that when your product launches, it's going to be better.
There are a lot of pieces here, and I think it's helpful when we're having this conversation about engagement. And I mentioned that previously, that is our theme for this new season, engaging the modern health consumer. And I was glad to have a discussion about web engagement because it's the core. It's a foundation of pretty much any digital experience. When I was thinking about some of the techniques you were just mentioning and where it led and what type of project it led you to create and design, it made me also think about, what other types of engagements any healthcare organization, a payer, a health system in particular, but anyone who's trying to have some interaction with their customer /member /patient /consumer. It's so easy to just gloss over some of these basics and just assume that people are going to click on the place that we think they're going to or that we want them to, or go find the page. And what I kept hearing through a lot of these descriptions that you just shared is not only is that not usually the case, that people aren't going to find the things we just think they're going to find. It takes a lot of this dedicated work to help them, to guide them along that way. And those things take a lot of time. They do take a lot of testing and research to get them there. I wonder if there's any insights or learning that we can broaden out from that experience, from this whole project and from other work that you've done to help us understand what types of engagements that modern consumers expect and what we do about that. When we're just talking about broadly from health and wellness, organizations, what types of engagements do you think people do expect?
I think that in the digital space, you're put in the unfortunate place of competing against the largest giants across multiple industries. You're facing people, especially in the e-commerce space, the Amazons, the Best Buys, the Walmarts, that are ruthlessly testing every possible improvement and change they can make to a site or to design or to any part of that, because for them, the most minute increase in making something better translates very quickly to revenue at scale. And these are the experiences that people are using and engaging with every single day. So, you might be, again, a regional health payer with a budget nowhere near the size of a giant payer, but you're competing against them. You're competing against someone that's maybe a new startup that, again, like they're coming in with a fresh slate. They got no baggage. They just hired the coolest, best UX designers. You're competing against DoorDash. You're competing against Etsy. You're competing against Uber. All of these companies that have focused on just making things clear, jargonless, and streamlined. And those are the expectations that people bring to all of their other interactions. I think especially with health systems, that's a huge frustration, is anywhere in the healthcare side with a company that's enterprise level that doesn't have a huge budget, you still probably have an enterprise amount of content and of product lines and services and categories. And the expectation from someone who's engaging with your business is that you're going to have everything as organized and as streamlined as an Amazon. And that's a really hard place to be. I think that's why UX testing is really important, because you can make a number of changes for a relatively small amount of time and money, especially if you insert it at the right part of a development process, or you're committed to continuous improvement that lets you get closer to the kind of streamlined experience that people are expecting.
I totally agree. I think that is, again, a foundation of the playbook for consumer experience. One thing we've been asking in this new season is, again, maybe it comes back to one of the things you said in your introduction, which is what you enjoy about being in healthcare, or one of the unique things. It's so easy to get bogged down in the things that are not going according to plan in healthcare, the things that need improvement. But I feel like everyone that we've ever invited on the podcast has some hope for the future of healthcare in the country. They hope and feel like things are going to get better at some point. I wonder if that's the case with you, if you do feel like there is, some hope for the future of healthcare in our country. And if so, what gives you that hope?
So coming at it from doing a good bit of time at a payer, something that I think about a lot is access to care. And it's how quickly can someone get access to care when they need it. My straight answer is I think that there's so much potential in telemedicine, but I want to go one level farther than that. There was a specific app that I've had a lot of experience with called Galileo Health. And it's a telemedicine app, but it's one of the only ones I know that uses an asynchronous model of care. So everything that you do is more or less over just chatting. I could get my prescription refilled over 2 or 3 days, as opposed to even just doing a video call where you're I don't want to carve out 30 minutes of my day to find the next available provider on this app or something. Everything was just taken care of via text, essentially. And it could solve a pretty good amount of things. Even issues that you would think would require an in-person visit, you could do pretty well with telemedicine, like issues where, you might have a skin issue. I have eczema, for example, and it's like on a normal thing, if you're like, I needed a steroid cream, you'd have to go to a doctor. They'd have to look at it. It'd become this whole thing. And especially, I think a lot of these things are frustrating because you as a person, you're like, I know what it is. I've had this before. I have this problem. UTIs are another classic example where, you can just send in a picture of it and that'll work. And had you were just chatting, not in real time. And that was what I really liked. I thought that was as close to the way of the future that I could imagine, in the way that, I imagine someone gets up and says, I'm going to launch Uber. I'm going to redo taxis. I'm like, it's the only thing that I've seen where you could just chat with a nurse and have it taken care of without time pressure. I think that takes access to care a step further, where it doesn't even take out time of your day for most things. And it's not totally appropriate for everything. If you had to, in one case, my wife used it and she ended up having to need an MRI. So, they still found her a place to get an MRI. They go, this isn't network, refer you here, you go, you get it done. It actually acted as our primary care. There were some trials to even use it as a first line primary care for Medicaid patients who traditionally, they can be the hardest to reach and have some of the lowest usage of care. So pieces like that of just trying to, again, let people get access to care when they need it at an affordable amount and on a service that works for their schedule. I'm on this podcast. I would assume most of our listeners on this podcast were white collar. Generally, I'm going to say we can have flexibility with our schedules and our bosses and things to be like, do you mind if I take an hour out of my day? But there's a lot of people that, if they're doing shift work or if they're doing numerous industries, their full 9 to 5 is taken up by something that they can't have a break in. And that's where I think asynchronous care was really fascinating to me.
Love that. Ryan, it has been a pleasure to speak with you about all of this, and I appreciate you giving us, I was not familiar with Galileo Health, and I've heard of the concept of asynchronous care, so I'm really curious now about, where that can go. So I appreciate you giving us so much to think about today. And with that is a wrap for this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with Ryan Kilgallen from Over It. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Jared.